All right, guys. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, this is Restoration Rescue, and in today's video, what we're gonna do is we're gonna rebuild this Muncie 318 transmission. All right guys, so what we did while you were gone is we took this gasket, we were able to get this out. Then a couple other things that we took care of. There is the speedometer driven gear that we were able to take off. As you can see, it's a little dented. That's not that big of a deal, but what we needed to do is there's a bearing that's on here as well as this. This is the gear that goes on it. There's this ring that needs to come out to drop the bearing. But what we did to get this off, because it's pressed on, and in all the other videos we see is everybody's just like, oh, we just pulled it off, which is not the case for everybody. What we did is we hit it with some heat, heated it up so it expanded it a little bit, then took a punch after we doused it with some brake clean and just smacked it off, and it came right off. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to come over here to the counter shaft at the front of the transmission, and we're gonna take this little nut off. So in the great wisdom of Chevy and Muncie back in the day to team up and another tool company, they made a tool specific for these transmissions for this nut, because as you can see, if you look in there, there is not that much room to get to that nut. So we ordered the tool, but obviously it wasn't in yet. So I went over to Lowe's and was able to get this tool, which has the same dimensions here. It was just a little bit thicker. So I was able to sand it down. I'm able to put it on. And just mind you that this nut is lefty tighty, righty loosey, which obviously is not the right way for most people. So we were able to get it to spin, and it just comes right off, as you can see, once it gets through all the threads, hopefully. And that will give us the ability to get to the other bearing. We need to hold on to that because that's got to go back on. Get to the other bearing, which needs to be kind of smacked off. One thing else we did while you were away, there is this little bearing that goes in the clutch sleeve that comes in here. This ring right here is around it in here, and there's these two little holes on the side, or the one hole here. You have to line it up, open it up so it expands, and able to pull it out. It's kind of a pain in the butt and would have been really hard for us to show you guys. But now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get this bearing off and continue and start rebuilding this transmission for you. All right, so what we did is we took this brass little drift here that I got at the local auto parts store, not really that expensive, to knock off this bushing so that we have a spot so that we can put the new bushing on. So, as you can see, it put a lot of oil. Oh, good. Hold on. All right, so we actually got a part. That was the little bit of a delay, so we're gonna open it up. And it should be the same as this right here. Let's hope it is, because nobody labels anything as, all right, I think we are wrong. All right, well, that is not the right one, so that needs to be returned. Oh well, that's okay, we can still reuse that one. It's not that big a deal. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get back to trying to get this thing back together. And one thing I wanted to show you is this right here is the new set of bearings right here. We have our seals. We have the rear seal to the, or gasket to the tail shaft. Some more lock rings, and in these blue bags are what's called needle bearings. And when we took this apart, there's probably like 8 million all over the place right now in this garage of the little needle bearings that came off of this thing. When we took it apart. And there's a couple different spots that needle bearings go, right in the end of this, and then a couple sets that go in here. That is why we have, where did it go? Our assembly goo. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So the assembly goo is when we put it together. This is made specifically for transmissions. Is that when we put it together, it holds these needle bearings in, because just laying in there, they're all going to fall out. And it just gives up some startup lube so that the gear oil can get into where it needs to go. And then this, just like when we're rebuilding a motor, gives it a little bit of a chance not to grind the metal together. So let's start knocking this out. All right, guys, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little bit of explaining here for you. First, we're gonna talk about this book here that we got online. This thing comes in great handy. It shows a big spread out thing of everything, as you saw right at the beginning of this clip. So then we're gonna take this, we're gonna put this in here, which you're gonna take a mallet and just knock that in. And then we're gonna come over here to the clutch gear and put our good old fashioned bearing on. The bearing has to go in with the lock where the snap ring is gonna go, this little groove right here. And this is gonna go on here. We are gonna have to put it down and put probably a hammer on it or something to get it on and pressed on beyond this nut. And then put our nut on. That is one size fits absolutely no wrenches, except for that one from Cobalt. So let's knock this out and let's move on to the next step. All right, guys. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. All right, guys, just kidding. This is coming from our spare transmission, and this is not the one we needed. We just needed to steal some parts out of it and just check some things out to make sure that we do this thing right. So we're gonna put this one and hide that one over here so we don't have to worry about dropping it. And this is the one that's completely done, as you can see. The bearing spins freely, really nice. And then this is all together. As you can see, it's the gear bearing, and then it's a gland nut is what they call it online. So we're gonna safely put this one over here so we don't drop it on the ground and damage it. But now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come to the main shaft of the transmission and come in and get this part all set up so we can do this. So what this is the gear, and this goes all the way up here. Then you're gonna take this, the thrust washer, and you can see these things have these little cuts in them. They're gonna go up against it this way, just like that. Then, the same orientation with the snap ring headed towards the gear, this goes on, and then you have your little snap ring that goes in right here and holds it all together. This down here is the speed driven gear. What this does is this is pressed on right about here. And at the back of the transmission on the case, which is MIA for me right now, not a big deal, there's a hole. And there's gonna be a gear that goes inside, and this pretty much sends to your dashboard how fast you're going. As many times as this revs or goes around, it's showing you that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna knock this out and move on. All right, guys, don't worry. I'm not gonna drop this one. This is the real one. So as you can see, it springs freely. This thing is good to go. It's all set. We're gonna put this thing right over here so I don't drop it on the floor like the other thing. But that's going to be a wrap for today's video. Make sure you guys comment, like, and subscribe. In the next video, in part 2 of putting this thing back together, we're going to put on the needle bearings. We're going to slam this thing back in so we can be ripping gears down the road. So see you later.